Welcome to the Traipsin Global on Wheels podcast hour.
Thank you. I'm glad to be
Of
here with you.
course, Reveca Torres was injured and paralyzed in a car accident at the age of 13. After completing degrees in fashion design and theater arts, Reveca simultaneously worked as a costume designer and with various organizations doing disability work in the realm of health, fitness, transitioning, recreation, education, and peer support. She started a nonprofit called BackBones in 2009 after realizing that years of interaction and friendship with others living with spinal injuries had made a significant impact on her self-image, confidence, and drive to succeed. Reveca wanted to ensure that others, especially those newly injured, had access to resources, information, and the same type of peer support she has had. She is the director of ReelAbilities Film Festival Chicago and has curated touring photography and art exhibitions that showcase the work of people with disabilities and bring awareness to disability rights. Reveca uses painting, illustration, photography, film, movement, and other media as forms of expression and tools for advocacy and social justice. Wow, that is awesome. Great work, Reveca.
Thank you.
So our first question for you is why did you want to become a fashion designer? So as you know, I was doing research on you. It seems like you knew that was what you wanted to do from a very early age.
Yeah, since I was a kid, I've been interested in art and doing illustrations, and I would just find myself making little doodles at school, or I'd make these little notebooks with drawings of, different clothing or shoes and things like that. So it was something I was always interested in, and more like the design of it. And artistically. So, I wasn't a person like I'm not a person who's always glammed up. I'm actually always in like yoga pants and a sweater. But I just love like, the design of it. I think it's really interesting and I think I knew it from a very young age.
That's wonderful. I feel like there aren't enough individuals with disabilities in the art, actually in all the different fields. So I see that you became the first person in a wheelchair to complete the fashion design degree at Harper College. What particular challenges did you face as you went through the program that you felt like other fashion designer classmates did not have to experience?
Well, definitely the physical limitations. I have a spinal cord injury and I'm paralyzed from the chest down, which, and also I have some uh, impairment in my arms and fingers and hands. So um, there definitely was the physical aspect of just getting things done. And I did have an aide that helped me in class that to help me keep up during like the lab type classes because they were like 3 4 hour long classes where we would just work. And I needed assistance with cutting, pinning onto the dress forms, setting up the sewing machine because, and a lot of the tables were really tall, so they had to, make a table that was um, lower so that I could pull up under it with my wheelchair. The school was very supportive. They didn't know what they were doing, and they definitely were scared and like, looked to me to inform them what I needed. And so I really had to be a self advocate to let them know what I needed and what would make it easier for me to participate and just have that communication open. And they were great. They um, did what they could to help me complete the program and do it successfully. And um, I feel like I did a really good. I had a really good uh, time there. Good program.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I remember when I was in high school, my chemistry teacher actually made a desk just for me so that, I could see over everyone else. The desks were all lined up in a way that I could maneuver around very well. I definitely resonated with you when you said, they looked to me, you know, to see how to adapt the environment to make it more accessible.
Yeah, we had
Um,
a trip to Paris at the end of the year, and I approached them and I said, you know, I want to go. Is this accessible? And they were like, no, it's not. We don't think you can go. And I was like, I was annoyed by the quick no. And so I did my research and, you know, called the hotels, got floor plans, figured out what Paris accessibility was like, and I came back and I was like, okay, this is what it's going to be like. I'm going. And they're like, okay. And I went. I went on this trip with them, and they were all, you know, after they were very grateful that, you know, I showed them that it was possible.
hmm
So,
Yeah, people are seem to be hesitant of the unknown, especially if they've never experienced it before. So building off of that, your experience, how do you think, just for the next generation of fashion designers who are also, in wheelchairs or have other kinds of disabilities, what can be improved? What advice would you give to colleges to make these programs more accessible?
having options, and I feel like not just for students in wheelchairs, but, you know, the whole student population could benefit from, you know, different setups in the classroom, and um, to support the student in whatever, you know, whatever they need, accommodations and things. Um, but yeah, having that open communication. This, and also I went to school a long time ago, so it might be a little bit different now, and, you know, the processes of, you know, if you're a student with a disability and getting an accommodation and all of that.
hmm So
But yeah, definitely connecting with like a disability resource center or something like that at the school was a big help for me, because they were also there to advocate for me if, you know, if I came across any issues.
hmm So I see that you were featured, your collections were featured, and that you're a representative and finalist at the Fashion Group International Costume Design Competition at Harper College. What do you think is different about pursuing a fashion design degree as a wheelchair user compared to an able-bodied person? How has that influenced your art, your designs?
Well, I think initially when going through school, I I sort of didn't really want to, like, I wanted to keep up with everyone and the projects that everyone was doing, and I didn't really think about that much, like, adapting, or what, you know, what I was, you know, as far as like adaptive clothing or anything like that, or designing in that sense. But and my style was more wearable art, so even so, it was like almost like sculpturing, and art, something that you wouldn't wear out every day, more theatrical and for the stage. So that's kind of where, you know, my mind was designing. And it hasn't been until recent years that I've thought more of designing for someone in a chair, or for adapting clothing, and because fashion for fashion that for people with disabilities has been like so bad for a long time. They People think of, you know, adapting things using like Velcro and snaps and thing, and not really of like making it adaptive and functional, but not always fashionable. So I think there's a lot of people that are starting to do that now, and are doing it well. And even, you know, a lot of the mainstream um, brands and designers are actually now thinking about this, and thinking about different bodies, and how to design for people with different bodies
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
different needs.
Yeah.
So it's exciting. I think it's very exciting right now.
Yeah. So do you have any desire to go towards that direction in a larger way, or has that chapter kind of um you don't have a huge passion in that area anymore?
I do, and I would love to. I just at this point, I've been sort of very focused on BackBones, and um, you know, focusing on that um, is something I can't do right now. But I would love to somehow get back to doing that. That would be really cool.
Yeah, no, totally understandable. Well, we're only one person, right?
Right.
So, how has painting, illustration, photography, film, movement, and other media as a form of expression been a tool for you to do your advocacy and social justice work with Backbone or other work that you've done in the past?
Well, I think in the past, prior to Backbones, I sort of felt that those two things had to be kept separately. So, um, my disability and advocacy work had to be separate than my art and my design stuff. And it wasn't until after starting Backbones that I realized that I had all these, creative artistic skills that were transferable um, to nonprofit and to awareness and to um, moving forward with a mission. And I think, art is very universal and people can understand it across, a variety of platforms. And um, so I started using um, what I could creatively, and and honestly, that was also a way for me to get back to creative stuff too, to have the opportunity to be creative um, within the nonprofit, managing a nonprofit. And so I started a an awareness project called Reinventing the Wheel, where um, we matched 21 photographers with 21 people with spinal cord injuries and had them document their stories through photography. Um, and the reason behind this project was because when we were doing our website, like people in wheelchairs that looked really sad, and um, or the opposite of that was in the sunset with their arms up in the air and trying to be very inspirational. And there wasn't anything in between where people were just living their lives, going to work, going to school, having families, and so I wanted to show that people are just living real normal lives. Um, and we were able to do that through this photography exhibit. It it exhibited here in Chicago, and then it went on to tour to. It was in New York after that, and then Washington and Oregon. It went to Pittsburgh, and then it came back to Harper here in Illinois, and part of it is currently at the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab in Chicago. But that's an
Wow.
example of of how I was able to use um, my creative and artistic um, skills to transfer over to share a message, to educate people, and the feedback we've gotten from that is just that it's been really positive that people see things differently and understand. Um, and actually, if you go to our website at backbonesonline.com, all the images are there. It's like a digital collection that you can see them on our website and read people's bios and everything.
Wow. Yeah, I'll be sure to check it out. Yeah, I really resonate with that as well because, it seems like when you look around, only the most extraordinary people with disabilities get noticed or feel like get a voice or equal voice to able-bodied populations. So I was really happy for you to hear that you're seeking to change that image and just documenting the everyday lives that everyone else does, traveling, working, going to school. So in terms of BackBones, I know you started it in 2009. It's a nonprofit organization that provides one-to-one support for individuals with spinal cord injuries. So can you share with us on how it all got started?
Sure. Well, a lot of things were happening at the same time. I was going. I wanted to go to this spinal cord injury recovery program that was out in California, not covered by insurance. So we started fundraising, and a couple friends and my family, and we started fundraising so that I could go out there for a few months. And we wanted to set up a website where people could make donations, but we didn't want it to be something like, you know, fundraise for Reveca or something like really cheesy and dorky. Um, so we were trying to think of like what to name it, and something that would mean support and spinal cord injury. And looking through a thesaurus, we came across BackBones, and we're like, that's perfect. So we kind of named this little fundraising campaign that we were doing BackBones, and we were successful in fundraising for me to go out to California. I was out there for 3 months. I came back, and meeting people over there with similar injuries, and discussing, what it was like to go home after our injury, and the lack of the feeling that we all felt. We all felt there was lack of like peer support once we got home, or that things were really difficult after leaving rehab to find information, and that um, felt familiar to me. I felt that experience too. Um, so I just kept thinking about that, and I also thought about when I went to college to Arizona, was the first time really after my injury, because I was injured at 13. So it wasn't until college that I started meeting other people with disabilities and injuries, and um, it made a really big difference for me. It made me see what others were doing, um, and then me comparing myself, or seeing an example in other people and saying, oh, I can do that too, or like I can travel, I can try that sport, or I can, anything. So all these things going through my mind. People are now starting to think that Backbones is a organization, because I don't know, because they just thought we were. And so I started thinking, well, we can do more. We can help people. All these people are feeling like this. We can help people. And so I went to this fashion show with my friends, and um, I didn't know it was a benefit for an organization called Immerman Angels that's here in Chicago. And what that organization does is one on one peer support for people that are cancer fighters with cancer survivors, and matching them up for support. And so I went to this fashion show, and somebody handed me a card, and I went because it was just being advertised, and I wanted to go to this show. But they gave me a card and said, this is what this is for. I came home and I did some research, and I was like, wow, this organization is amazing. Like, it's such a simple model. We're just matching people that have gone through the same experience, um, and they're finding so much support in that connection. And I thought, if I would have had this when I was 13, to been able to talk to another girl that had gone through the same thing, or was going through the same thing as I was, like, that would have been a game changer for me. Um, and that's basically where it got started. I was obsessed with their website, and like a month or two later, I finally got the guts to call their director, and I asked him if he would have lunch with me, and we sat down, and he sort of guided me um, to figure out how to start Backbones. And I pretty much based it off the model of their organization, and it's now evolved into something different. But that was the beginnings of it, and I'm still very good friends with Johnny Immerman, the director. Every time I'll reach out to him, and I'm like, hey, I'm going through this, help me out. And so he's my one-on-one nonprofit peer.
What has it evolved into? Can you elaborate on the changes, the metamorphism, and then what you see for the future?
Yeah, it's yeah, it started as matching one-on-one, and matching people with a similar injury, similar age, um, background, not necessarily no location. Um, if location was possible, then great, but just people that would find something in common and could even communicate over Skype or the phone or email. Um, so eventually, we started doing some events for fundraising, um, but we were noticing at these events that people were talking to each other and they were exchanging phone numbers, and the next day they were becoming friends on Facebook, and they were creating these connections in a more um, normal way, I guess, the way that everyone meets each other at an event or an activity, become friends and continue to stay connected. And so it was happening in a more, social setting. And when we were matching people, I felt like sometimes people wouldn't make that phone call or send that email because it can be awkward to reach out to someone who you don't know, especially to say like, oh hey, I, I'm paralyzed and you're paralyzed, let's be friends. It's um, it's sometimes not the best way for people. So we still continue to do that when people request to be matched or are requesting for resources, but we have become a little more focused on creating these spaces and events where people can meet in person, um, and make friends and talk to people, and they're open to everyone. It's not just chair users or just people with spinal cord injuries. It's open to family members, to friends, or just anybody, because I think it's important to breaking down barriers, that it's not that anyone is welcome. Anyone can ask a question. Anyone can try it and get to know each other. And I think that's how we're going to start making changes and changing stereotypes and on what disability is for people that don't, have never experienced even talking to someone with a disability, which is so common. You'd think it wouldn't be, but it is. A lot of people don't even know how to interact with someone.
This is
So
wonderful. So it seems like you were, at the right place at the right time when you got these ideas and really filled the need that people wanted. So why was this so important? I read in one article that you left your fashion design career path, and correct me if I'm wrong, to pursue backbones. Did you feel like you really had to leave that behind, or was that something you just put aside for a little bit?
I put it aside for a little bit, and I still do a little bit of it, but not. I mean, just for fun. I don't do it as like for work or anything, but I don't know why I felt the need to do it. I think I felt this was important, and I hope that I'm helping people and that, it's making a difference in their life. I just know that in my experience, finding a community meant so much for me that I can't imagine, where I would be without it. And so I'm so grateful for having a community of other people with disabilities that I think we should all have it. It's not a great thing to feel isolated and to not have someone that can understand what you're going through. So,
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I think, even able-bodied, any other type of people, kinds of people out there, they feel isolated, especially ironically more so with this age of social media. In some ways, perhaps more so for people with disabilities. So, what progress have you made with Backbones that you personally are especially proud of?
I'm mostly proud of, the connections that I've been able to build with other organizations that are doing similar work, and that are kind of the same size as Backbones. Like we're smaller organizations. Excuse me, and you know, just forming these like bonds and networks with other like-minded organizations, because it's really nice to work together instead of competing or trying to be better than one another. I think there's this um, this community between us, and I think that's what I'm most proud of. That and I try and continue to do, and just like forming connections, giving each other resources, collaborating, and whenever we can, we're all serving the same people, and if we can do that to the best of our abilities and as efficiently as possible together, I think that's important.
Yeah, I see on social media you're definitely very supportive in getting the word out on the various organizations and, really bringing everybody together on your platform. So I read that you wrote about, I forget which article it was, but you touched on the plight of individuals with disabilities internationally and the lack of rights and resources they have, even though it seems, there are a lot to complain about here domestically, but we also have a lot of resources at our hand and, have a lot of rights that others abroad don't have. And so, how have or do you plan to in the future to expand the services of Backbones to individuals with disabilities all over the globe?
Well, it's not an initiative that like we're actively um, pursuing, but it's been happening. Like we've um, gotten contacted by people from different countries, and if I can help provide some resource, then I will. I'm not gonna turn anyone away, but we've been able to help different people. Recently, earlier this year, there was a young woman in Mexico who is going to school for psychology, and her wheelchair was just getting to a point where she lives in a really really small town where like there isn't a lot of sidewalk, like it's cobblestones and like dirt roads, um, and so her chair was pretty banged up, and she was asking for resources on where she could get a new wheelchair, and I was able to work with another organization here called Wheeling Forward, but they're based out of New York. But yeah, I'm friends with the directors there, and I contacted them, and they had a chair that was in good condition. We figured out measurements. We found her this chair, and we were able to get it sent out to Oregon, which is where she had a cousin or an uncle that were living there, and then they were able to travel to Mexico and take her this wheelchair, instead of us having to ship it to Mexico and having to worry about customs and shipping costs and stuff. So we were able to work this out. It took a few weeks for her to get her chair, because we had to work all that out, but we made it happen, and she sent us a whole bunch of pictures of herself and in her chair and doing all sorts of things, which was really nice to see. But things like that, like just getting people to the resources that they need, sometimes is one little thing that we can do, but it really makes an impact for them.
That's wonderful. A great story as well. So I see that you are, the director of ReelAbilities Film Festival Chicago, and my next series of questions are regarding, media and individuals with disabilities. So, what are the challenges disabled people face when trying to be more visible and present in the media? What progress has been made in including individuals with disabilities in the media and the arts?
Well, challenges for sure are representation, and like I said earlier, with that photography exhibition, um, just the images that are out there are not representative of our lives, or they're used in a way where they are not portraying us in a positive way or how we should be portrayed. And oftentimes, because these images or these stories are told by people that have not lived the disability experience, I think it's a challenge to get people to share stories and for us to be in charge of that narrative, of how our stories are presented. But I think there is progress, there is change, and um, there are some really great films out there that are um, sharing stories in a way that they should be, and we're starting to see more actors with disabilities playing roles um, that are not necessarily, the typical disabled person in this film. They actually are a character with depth and stuff. So that's really nice to see. But I also think a challenge is that, um, oftentimes a lot of people have an issue when there's like an actor that's playing a person with a disability and the actor is not disabled themselves. And I understand how that can be really annoying and not right, but we aren't we don't have a lot of actors, trained professional actors, um, that have disabilities, and so I think the problem is, um, providing these opportunities for professional development, in training and having these people have the training and skills to be competitive and to be able to fill these roles. So I think it needs to sort of take a step back and um, make some change in the education and opportunity part of it, so that then we can start seeing more of these roles played by actors and actresses with disabilities.
And yeah, that's a very good point about, how there are not, even though there is um, a desire for individuals with disabilities to play disabled individuals on the big screen, but there are a limited number of people who are professionally trained in that field. And so
Mm-hmm.
that is a dilemma, and that as a system needs to change, and that's where access comes into play as well. So in terms of portrayals of other things such as beauty and sexuality of individuals with disabilities, what would you change in that regard, or what would?
Well, I think that's also something that needs to change too. A lot of, um, I mean, in general, I think people with disabilities are not considered, they're not, they don't fall under the standard of beauty. And I mean, I guess a lot of people don't. There's, um, not everyone's a supermodel or things like that. But uh, yeah, just, seeing different bodies um, as beautiful, I think is something that needs to change. Um, and also as people with disabilities being sexual and being, having relationships, and it's not common for people to think, oh, I can have a relationship with a person with a disability, or they think it's scary, or um, so yeah, I think that just needs to change as well.
Mhm. Perhaps more of a direct follow up to that previous question was, how can we empower more people with disabilities to want to be in film, theater, and the rest of performing arts to pursue it as a profession?
Well, I think it, we want to empower people. I think we need to provide these opportunities. And if we're not providing, if we're not creating these opportunities ourselves, which I think is what happens a lot of times when we're in, in an industry where there aren't opportunities. A lot of times people create their own opportunities, but um, reaching out to the 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 players in these areas. So, for example, with ReelAbilities, we're currently trying to develop these development workshops for um, creatives with disabilities, and one being, models and actors. And we want to bring in to a room into this like workshop, not just models and actors with disabilities, but casting directors and you know big companies and marketing or advertising reps, um, and really just bring them all together to understand that this is, disability is part of diversity, which is often overlooked when people use the word diversity. And so, showing that disability is diversity, showing that there's these people that are models and actors, and that they can do things outside of being the person with a disability. They can be, play other parts. And this came about because um, one of our volunteers was saying that, she's a model and an actor and she has an agent, but the agent was only sharing with her roles where it's about education and just making the people that make these decisions aware of the possibility, because they might just be stuck in their mind and in a way because they don't know otherwise.
That's a good point. So, speaking of role models, were there any individuals with disabilities after you got injured that you looked up to as role models?
Yes, there has been, and I think there is many and continue to be. Um, but I think one of my first was probably a college counselor at Harper who um, is a woman, also Mexican like myself, wheelchair user. Um, and so when I started at Harper, I met with her, and she was at the disability office there. She's a counselor there. And we just started talking about, she started sharing about her experience, and she had been involved in like the protesting when they were trying to make all the buses accessible and getting ramps and lifts on the buses. And you know she had gotten arrested and all these things, and I was just like, wow, this woman is like so badass. Like, this was the first time me encountering someone with a disability that was being an activist and advocate for our community and making that she made change. um, and I just thought that was so cool. And in my mind, I was like, I want to be like her someday. And we've kept in touch over the years. And yeah, I mean, but that was one of my first times that I had met someone with a disability that was like doing something great, and that motivated me to do that too. But yeah, there's been a lot of people along the way. Another person was when I was living in Oregon. I was doing an internship at Mercy Corps, and the director there, he was a man with a spinal cord injury, and he just like knew so much, and I learned a lot from him as well. Um, but yeah, I feel like every encounter with other people, I learn from people all the time.
What
And
about in terms of um, in the larger uh, media platform, in terms of the big screen movies or plays or theater or whatnot? Were there individuals with disabilities in the arts field that you felt like you connected with?
I can't think of any off the top of my head. I just recall that every time like I would see a wheelchair on TV, I immediately paid attention and took notice of this person on television, in a wheelchair, even if it wasn't, a good portrayal of the person, or of, whatever interaction was happening on the screen. But I did take notice. So, I think it's important. Like, I was like, oh, I see that.
I
And
think portrayals are very important, especially and powerful, especially these days. Just we're just such a visual society, more so than ever before. Um, So next we're gonna transition to business advice with you having started a nonprofit, BackBones. What advice do you have for people with disabilities who are trying to start their own business, such as myself? What would you have liked to see made available when you were establishing your own nonprofit?
Mm, support from others. I think just asking questions and learning from others was really important. But yeah, I think starting a business or starting something is really empowering, and I love being my own boss. As a person with a disability, sometimes things come up, and to me, like a nine to five job was not something that fit with my lifestyle, and I wanted time to be able to do physical therapy if I needed to, or to you know whatever came up. Sometimes just things come up, and um, bladder, bowel issues, and things like that. So um, this has been really good for me to sort of be in control of my schedule, of how much time I dedicate to this and to other projects. But yeah, I think um, it would be great to have more resources out there to help people figure out how to start their own business, um, and also navigate the whole benefits part of it too, because I know a lot of people depend on benefits such as Social Security or home health care, and for their personal care attendants. So um, if there's resources to help people navigate how to do that without um, affecting them. So I think that would be good to have.
Great points. So, what challenges, as a wheelchair user, have you encountered in the realm of, starting a new business that are different? You feel like from other entrepreneurs, other people, able-bodied people who are going through a similar journey.
Well, in my case, it's a nonprofit, and I think this isn't particular to well, maybe it is to me having being in a wheelchair, but getting funding for the different projects, but that it just depends on what foundations are funding and things like that, and oftentimes we are able to get more grants and stuff from foundations that support projects for people with disabilities. I think if you're starting a business and you are wanting to get investors, I mean that's always a challenge. I think money's just the challenge.
Yeah, no, it definitely is, for anybody, whether you have a disability or not.
Hmm.
So I see that you've built a wonderful media presence and a great website. It's very easy to navigate. In terms of social media, how have you been able to grow it on the various platforms and stay so connected?
Um, just getting, um, being connected with different organizations that are like-minded, and following through like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and I also get Google alerts on different keywords every day so that I'm able to keep up, and find articles or things that are happening that I can share. But really, also through networking with other people and organizations, I'm always telling people like, send me your content. Like, don't be afraid. If you have a new blog and you want it shared, send it to me. I will share it. Because I don't always have time to be looking at everyone's stuff. So I appreciate when people send me things, and I'm very, very happy to share, because I think that's part of what keeps us connected, is having that knowledge and finding out what events are happening, what resources there are. Um, you know, so I'm always willing to share, so anyone
So
can
we're gonna
always.
move on to our last topic, which is fitness. I see that you were really into fitness when you were in Oregon and Arizona. Why do you think staying fit is so important for people with disabilities, specifically wheelchair users?
I mean, I think it's important for everybody, obviously, but for us in general, like our bodies are already a little compromised, and any little thing can sort of you know take you out for a while. You can have a pressure sore, or you can have a UTI, or and then you're just kind of out of commission. And so, um, to me, it's been very, very important to keep myself healthy, because if I'm not taking care of myself, I can't do the things that I want to do. If I'm stuck with a bed sore for months, I can't go out and do fun things. I can't help people, or I can't travel, or so it's important for me um, to stay healthy, to minimize any secondary conditions, um, so that I can do the things that I want to do. Mostly, it's just me wanting to be able to be functional. Um, and I think it's important, and a lot of people assume that disability means that you're not well, and that's not true. You can be a very healthy, active, physical person. Um, you're just sitting in a wheelchair, doing it differently.
Precisely. I see that you teach and do yoga. So I've never been satisfied with the adaptive yoga I've been exposed to so far, although I haven't been exposed to that much adaptive yoga. Could you explain to our listeners what adaptive yoga is and how it's different from the regular yoga that most people know, rather that be, hot yoga or
Sure.
room temperature yoga?
Well, just to be clear, I am not a yoga instructor. Um, I do practice yoga, and I have through BackBones. I've set up different workshops, but I bring in instructors that know what they're doing. I'm not an instructor, or not trained or anything, but I have learned a lot from my own body. Adaptive yoga, I think a lot of people think of it as, it's different than um, regular yoga, and it is, but yoga really is about you doing what you can at that time and moment. And so I think, I hesitate when people say, like, oh, adaptive, um, because I think it's everyone practices what they can at that moment, regardless if you have a physical disability or not. What we do in the workshops is, have some time for people to learn about breathing, learn about moving, and there's opportunity for people to learn how to do these postures and breathing in their wheelchair, and then there's opportunity to learn how to do them out of their wheelchair, on the floor, on the mat, and it really, it's really, a lot of times people don't understand what a huge impact it is to just breathe a certain way. And so sometimes people that are, high level quads are like, well, I'm completely paralyzed. Like, how am I going to be doing yoga and be bendy? And same with me when I first started, or was going to go, like, I was hesitant and I was intimidated to go, because I thought, I'm paralyzed. I'm just going to go sit in this class and watch people do bendy things, and what am I going to do? And it wasn't like that a lot at all. The breathing, um, was, starting with the breathing, it made such a huge difference. And then moving into different positions, that I was hooked the very first day I tried yoga. And I just felt really good. My body felt good. I had less pain, less spasms, been way more aware of my body than I was before. And I think that's important. And it goes back to the health and fitness part, where if you're aware of your body, then you know when something is wrong, and you know when you need to eat better, or when you need to go to the doctor, or you start listening to these things that your body is telling you. And in a way, that's a little bit of a blessing, because a lot of people that don't have disabilities are very disconnected from their bodies and don't really think about it. But I feel like through yoga and through fitness, I've been able to learn so much about my own body that I can pay attention and know um, when I need to do something about my health or the way that I'm feeling.
Sure, sure. That was our last question. Was there anything else that you wanted to share in terms of, last words or dreams for the future in terms of the disability rights movement, or more specifically, backbones?
Moving towards the future, I'm really excited where we're at right now. That I think that a lot of people with disabilities are getting more involved in advocacy, and also being more present on social media, or getting involved civically. That it's it's kind of exciting to see, and I'm hoping that more young people with disabilities also continue to do their part, and get involved, and make some change, because there's a lot that a lot of positive things that have changed, but we need more, and we need more access, more representation.
Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us today. We learned a lot from you, and I appreciated you for carving out a good chunk of your day to do this.
No problem. It was a pleasure. It was really nice chatting with you.